We are recapping the best games, the best coaches, the best rivalries, and the best players of the past decade in college basketball. So this is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to another edition of Incompetent Sports Talk, along with Mike Rabin and Joan Loprena. I'm Alex Salzman. This week we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to take a trip down memory lane, looking at college basketball the past decade, and we're going to make our own individual top 5 lists in certain categories, recapping the decade that was. And I'll start with mine first. I'm going to recap the top 5 best college basketball games of the past decade. And we'll go back to 2008 for our first one on January 23rd. Baylor over number 16 Texas A&M. Two teams, not a whole lot of tradition, but it was a great basketball game. 5 overtimes. It was the longest game ever in the history of the Big 12. A&M had a 14-point lead they saw evaporate when it went to overtime. And then Baylor won the game, and then the week after that, they were ranked for the first time since 1969. Scott Drew doing one of the best coaching jobs of the past decade. Definitely an underrated basketball coach for what he did at Baylor. So that game, just along with the longevity of the game, and then with the fact of Scott Drew's coaching job, I put that at number 5. Number 4, 2005 Elite 8. I mean, there was 2 great games on that day, Kentucky versus Michigan State. But the one I picked is Arizona, who was a 3 seed, taking on Illinois, who was a 1 seed. Illinois was down by 15 after Arizona just capped off an 18-4 run. Illinois goes on a 20-5 run, sends it to overtime, and then wins by 1 point. And Bruce Weber and the Illini kept a dream season alive going to the Final Four with the win over Lute Olson's team. And that was a terrific game. Let's go to number 3. Go back to 2008, the national title game, Kansas and Memphis. The only national title game in that decade that went to overtime. Kansas was down 9 with 2 minutes and 12 seconds to go. 2.1 seconds to go. Mario Chalmers hits a big 3-pointer to send the game to overtime. And then Kansas won 75-68 after going on a 12-5 run in overtime to get the win. And second, now 2 and 1, it was really hard for me to distinguish the two. I think these are clearly the 2 best games of the decade. 2, I'll go with the 6 overtime thriller. 2009 Big East tournament, Syracuse versus UConn. And I think everybody remembers where they were when this game happened. All the text messages they were receiving, hey, are you watching this game? That game fit the bill. I mean, Jim Boeheim said it was the most proud he's ever been of a basketball team after a game. And this guy's been coaching for over 30 years and has coached a national championship team. And he said this is the most proud he's ever been after a team after a game. Just amazing. Andy Routens had the 3-pointer that they thought sealed the win, and then it was taken away, which led to 6 overtimes. 102 combined points in the 6 overtimes. So it's just an amazing basketball game. A lot of times people throw around the word epic, and this one really, truly was an epic basketball game. And the amazing thing was also is that Syracuse, in the first 5 overtimes, they never even had the lead. They took the lead in the 6th overtime, and then they ended up winning by 10 points on 127-117. Just a terrific basketball game. And number 1, I think the game that sparked the imagination of basketball fans and basketball teams across the country, the game that showed you that a mid-major could make it to the Final Four. George Mason, the 11th-seeded team, taking on the 1-seeded UConn. UConn hit a basket to send it to overtime with no time left, and then George Mason hitting 5 of their 6 field goals in overtime. Missed some free throws. UConn had a shot, a 3-pointer that would have won them the game, but they missed it. It rimmed in and out. Jim Larinaga, Cinderella, the slipper was still fitting for him that night. And then the best thing, too, is Jim Larinaga, a couple years later, could have gone to Providence. He said it was his dream job. He is his alma mater. And he didn't go back because he wanted to stay at George Mason. I mean, just a terrific story. You know, George Mason that year, they beat Michigan State. They beat UNC. Those 2 teams were in the Final Four the year before. UNC was in the national championship game. To beat those teams, to beat a hot Wichita State team, I mean, I'll just never forget that. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that in college basketball ever again. A game that just capped the imaginations of basketball fans across the country. So now we need to get your feedback. Was the list good? And then is there any game that I left off that you would replace any of these ones with?
I love the list.
Yeah, thank you.
I would have just rearranged the order a little bit, and then I have like an honorable mention.
Okay, yeah.
A game that wasn't quite that big but could have been huge. I think Xavier, Ohio State. I think it was the second round in the 2007 NCAA tournament. Xavier should have won that game. Ohio State steps up, hit some huge shots at the end, but you had it. But my number one overall is Illinois, Arizona is the Elite Eight. That's personal rooting interest in that game.
Yeah.
Never forget going nuts with all our buddies on spring break in Gulf Shores, Alabama. People in Alabama wondering why we were cheering so hard for Illinois, but it was just a great game, and the implications to take it to the to the Final Four.
Mike.
Yeah, I thought the list was fantastic. I couldn't really make any argument to change it. Being the North Carolina basketball historian that I try to claim to be, at least, a game that stands out for me that I don't know if you guys will remember specifically, 2005, Duke at North Carolina, the year North Carolina won the national championship. North Carolina was down 9 points with 2.5 minutes left, went on an 11-0 run to end the game, capped off with a Marvin Williams rebound, shot, a little kiss, and one. J.J. Redick shut out by Jack Emanuel in the second half. Just that game for that rivalry, the importance of that for Carolina to go on to win the national championship after that, it really propelled them. So I thought that game, that's a game that I would throw in there personally. But I don't know if they were any better than your list, but it was a really good game.
And Duke, Maryland in 01. You mentioned earlier before the show that either that one, the one where Duke came back with 10 and with the last minute to win that game, and also the comeback Duke had in the Final Four against Maryland that year. Some epic games between those two.
Oh, yeah, and another one I'll throw out there, I mentioned earlier the Michigan State-Kentucky game. Who could forget the zooming in on the toe on the three-point line for Kentucky? If Kentucky goes to the Final Four that year, who knows? Maybe Tubby would still be around in Lexington. And then I think you got to mention this game. It was in November back in 2005, so most people don't remember Michigan State-Gonzaga back in 2005, a 3-overtime thriller. I'm not a big Adam Morrison fan, but he put up 44 points in that game. Just a terrific game that year, too.